Hello. I described elsewhere uh, the key problems that we are having in psychological research which undermines the scientific validity of the whole field. In my book, Psychology, The Evolution of Psychology as a Science, I identify a few, discuss in details a few things, some meta-scientific aspects, which I'm not going to discuss here, and some practical aspects, three of which are the concept of false consciousness, which I already described in other videos, the problems with tautological definitions, which I talk about elsewhere in the book, and the one which we are going to discuss now is this problem of we have in psychology to identify the key variables, because in every times we study anything in psychology, we are dealing with complex entities. So we are going to dealing with complex human beings inside a complex human society. So the problem we have is that there are a lot of possible variables, which are, in the technical terms, is covariance. So they vary along with another variable. So if we don't distinguish between the two, we don't test whether or not we're talking about one or the other, the problem we are going to face is that we don't really know whether the effect we found is due to the variable we are studying or something else. These may sound a little bit too abstract and theoretical, so let's go into a practical example. So anything we are studying, any type of study we can do in psychology. So we say, okay, variable A, whether it is height or gender or income, and whatever it is, and we try to associate it to some outcomes. So say people who are taller have bigger income. I'm just making it up, but just okay, testing this sort of hypothesis. Do people with glasses read more books? Do people who, well, let's take gender, do men watch football more than women? But probably yes, but anyways, it's just very general theoretical. Do people who have purely psychometric dimension, do people with a higher IQ have more friends, and so on? So okay, I'm not making any of this is not a claim, it's just a hypothesis that we are testing. Okay, so if say I am a psychology and I want to study this, so I want to go, oh, do people who have higher IQ have more friends, less friends? So I'm going to make a study and see. What I'm going to do is take people, measure their IQ, then take people and measure their number of friends and see whether or not there is an effect there. Now the problem is that when it comes to psychology and us being complex human beings inside a very complex society, a lot of things vary one with another. So if say I have a high IQ, tendentially I tend to have a higher income as well, and I tend to be more successful in my career. Then I say the study finds that people with higher IQ, they have more friends. The question that we are supposed to addressing, and unfortunately more often than not in psychology we are not addressing, is okay, people with higher IQ tend to have more friends, but people with higher IQ tend to have higher income and have better careers. So how do we know whether having more friends is a function of higher IQ, higher income, higher status, a combination of all three? We need to test these hypotheses. And more often than not, psychology doesn't do that. I'm not saying we never do that, we kinda do that, but very often we have claims in psychology which are supported by the fact that, oh, I took a variable, I took another, I found a correlation, and now I'll go publishing studies over studies about the effect of, again, say, let's stick with this example. Oh, here's the effect that high IQ has on making friends, and we will pontificate and publish dozens of studies. Maybe it will become a bestseller, similar, and then we'll make fad trends about that, on how to increase your IQ so you can have more friends and stuff like that. And it will become a very big amount of nonsense that nonetheless is going to, one, become popular, become very used. Number three, more importantly, it will look like it is scientific, it will look like it is evidence based, because it seems to be factual, because I can say, oh, look, people with high IQ have more friends, I have evidence for this, I have the facts. So it seems like it's something that's being well done, when in reality it is not. And this is actually a very big problem in psychology. There is all sort of examples. Since we're talking about autistic people, there is a fun one, which is that the prevalence of autistic diagnosis correlates extremely well with organic food sales, which, if you use this sort of reasoning, then you should conclude that organic foods are causing more people to be autistic, which obviously is preposterous, but it's not more preposterous than a lot of things which we have currently in psychology. In fact, this is one of the reasons which has been stated by some researcher of why, how health guidelines constantly seem to be changing. So maybe sometimes drinking wine is extremely terrible for your health, and then suddenly drinking moderate amount of wine is actually good. Eating fats can be terrible, then it's good, and it's terrible again. They just keep changing all along, and one of the reasons is exactly this. The way we do these studies is just we take a bunch of variables. Okay, how much fat we eat, how much wine we eat, how much carbs we eat. Then we correlate it with a bunch of different health outcomes. Okay, prevalence of heart attack, prevalence of cancer, and whatever. And then the way scientific studies works, the way they are done, which is not really scientific, it's really a major problem, will have us simply find these sort of correlations, and then we will conclude something, but it's actually I won't go into details, but the way we conduct a study, 1 in 20 of this association is just basically random. So just like throwing a dice. If you throw the dice enough times, you will get any number you want, and that's the way you do science. By just putting data one against another, you always find something, but you don't really always know why. So some researchers have actually proved that effect of astrology on medical outcomes, effect of psychic phenomena, and they have scientific proof in the sense of this is how it works. You can find proof, and these are scientists who did not believe in this. I just show examples of how if you want to find an effect, the way science works nowadays, you will find it. So and there are actually some pretty funny ones which you can find online. There is a website called Spurious Correlations, which was done by a data science student precisely to show how if your whole research idea is taking variables and pinning them one against another, you are bound to find like completely weird and random stuff, which seems to be very substantiated by evidence, because if that's all you're looking at, that's what you're going to find. And then you find that, for instance, divorce rates is strongly associated with consumption of margarine, and you'll have that things like the amount of people killed by hot items correlates with the age of Miss America in that year, and the number of people drowning into a pool is correlated by the number of movies. I don't remember the name of the actor now, but in which this specific actor has appeared in. So you can pretty much find anything and find evidence of anything if that's the approach. So that's why we need to test for these sort of things. So we have discussed in the way in which psychological science is done, and the problem with not checking by variables that correlate one with another when investigating an effect. So if we take an effect, say high IQ, for instance, and we want to see whether it has an effect on how many friends a person have, so we can check the IQ of the person, we can check the number of friends the person has, and we can find an effect that IQ leads to having more friends or less, but we can find something. The problem is we don't really know if what we found is an effect of IQ or an effect of other things which correlates to IQ. So for instance, if say people with high IQ tend to have a higher income, then they tend to have more successful in their career, have a higher status, is more friends the outcome of high IQ, or is it an outcome of high income, or is it an outcome of high status? And we need to do that, otherwise whatever we find is going to not really be particularly useful. So now we can get to the point of how does this relate to autistic people, and how does it relate to the way we treat, diagnose, describe autistic people. Now, the problem here is that again, in psychology, this is a very common thing. A lot of things correlate one with another. So, for instance, when it comes to autism, we have tons of things which are more or less frequent in autistic people. So whenever we go and describe, okay, autistic people do this and that, they have difficulties in this and that, they are good in this and that, it's often important to address whether or not what we are seeing, this effect, is because they are autistic, or is it because of something else which happen to happen more frequently when somebody is autistic. And the thing is, there are a lot of things that come together with being autistic which are not relevant to being autistic per se, but may end up being frequently detected because they have they are covariant. They vary together with the variable of how of whether or not the person is autistic. It's also called comorbidity, which it's a term I don't like to use because it implies autistic spectrum as being a disorder or a disability, which I don't agree with. But anyway, it's called comorbidity as something of mental health situations, circumstances, issues, which tend to come one with another. So what are the things that correlate a lot with autism? For instance, one is high anxiety. How another one is depression. Depression. People who are autistic are 4 times more likely to be depressed, and they are 6 times more likely to be suicidal as compared to neurotypical people. Gender dysphoria, identification as non-binary, is more common in autistic people. Conditions like anaurelia and aphantasia, which you may have never heard of. If you haven't, anaurelia means that it's these are how many people have this inner monologue in their head. They're kind of talking to themselves in their head, and turns out that not everybody does that, which has actually surprised a lot of people who never had the experience of having this inner monologue, or people who have it have been surprised by finding out not everybody has. So this is a difference in the way we process things, and it could be related to autism. Another one is aphantasia, which is the ability to visualize or not. So it could be so say if I tell you close your eyes and visualize an apple, you could go from having a very vivid mental imagery of an apple in your mind, so you can see the apple with your mind eye, and or you could have a very vague image, or you could have no image of an apple at all. You know what an apple is, you know how it looks like, you know how to recognize an apple, but if I tell you close your eyes, visualize an apple with your mind eye, people with aphantasia are not capable of doing it. They don't have this. In fact, the condition is called also mind blindness because you don't have the ability to do this. And it turns out to be more common with autistic people. Another one is alexithymia, which is a Greek word for saying basically it means no words for feelings, and it refers to the inability or difficulty to identify a feeling with its name. So basically it's the inability to, when you have a certain set of sensations, so whether it is, say, you're having a set of physiological responses, which could be your a heart rate is heightened, or it can be you're sweating, you can be your pupil dilates, you have a sort of different physiological responses, but you don't really know what emotion, you don't know how, which emotion is occurring right now. So you may be angry and act as an angry person, but not being able to say, oh, what's happening is that I am angry. Or, and this may refer to other people as well. So you have that, for instance, you see, oh, somebody's happy. What does happy look like? Maybe this person is smiling at you and looking like this, and you say, oh, this person is happy. If you have alexithymia, you may not be very good at telling just by looking at somebody's happy face and say, oh, they're making this face because they are happy. And this turns out to be, it's not being autistic. It happens to neurotypical people too, but an autistic person is 4 times more likely to have alexithymia as opposed to a neurotypical person. So here comes the question. If we are looking at a person who is autistic, has depression, and has alexithymia. By the way, alexithymia is associated with being autistic. It is also associated with depression. So we are talking to a person who is autistic, has depression, has alexithymia, and you find that they have certain social inabilities, and you are describing them as what they are doing, and then you can associate it with something. But what are you supposed to associate it with? Is this person, you're seeing a certain behavior in this person, and this person is autistic, has depressed, and has alexithymia. Is this person behaving this way because this is a trait of being autistic? Is this a manifestation of being depressed? Is this a manifestation of having alexithymia? And this is what makes the things complicated. Because again, one of the things we tend to say about autistic people is that, they have inability to navigate social cues, and one can be facial perception as well. And you will find that indeed autistic people tend to have a higher prevalence of alexithymia. But if you don't really distinguish which is which, you may end up saying, okay, let's how can we help autistic people? Could be like, okay, let's have them practice how to recognize faces and name their feelings and things like that, which can be good if they happen to have also alexithymia. But technically speaking, what this does is addresses the issue of alexithymia. And if you say, oh, this is what autistic people are like, you'll end up that if an autistic person who has some issues, and you have them social issues, and you have them do this practice which would be good for somebody with alexithymia, but they don't have alexithymia, and then therefore it's not really going to be particularly helpful. Whereas maybe somebody who is neurotypical and has some social issues being there, because they have alexithymia, and it's less common, but neurotypical people can have alexithymia. And therefore, if you are saying, oh, oh, this is how autistic people look like, and therefore this person is not autistic, and therefore you're not going to not address, recognize, and treat their alexithymia because you have associated, oh, this is the behavior that autistic people have, and you have not made this distinction of, oh, this person is autistic, this person is depressed, this person has alexithymia, because they tend to go all one with another, but they are different. And it's actually the same thing. As I say, depression and alexithymia are linked one with another. So if also when an autistic person has alexithymia, you say, oh, does this happen because this person with alexithymia is autistic, or does this happen because this person with alexithymia is depressed? Because there is a link there too. So again, and a lot of things I have discussed here, how a lot of the so-called autistic symptoms, for instance, are more a manifestation of people's response to autistic people as opposed to their nature in itself, and I'll make more content about this soon. Well, for instance, when I discuss the psychological reactance, if you are constantly pushed against doing something, then you tend to strengthen that pattern. It's just this classic button with do not push this button label beyond it. What your mind immediately goes to, and what happens if I press this button? So you, by trying to inhibit something, you can strengthen it, and this effect in psychology is called as reactance. So again, when we are describing how autistic people behave, are we looking at, oh, this happens because they're autistic, or does this happens because being autistic they have been treated in a certain way which has caused certain mental and behavioral pattern to emerge? One example I've made indeed is reactance. Another one could be that autistic people tend to have social difficulties. They are different, so they can be seen as weird. So many of them maybe can be bullied. Many of them may face abuse because of not being capable to, fend for themselves within a social context. So they may have trauma, childhood trauma associated with this. So when you're looking at this person's behavior, and this person is autistic, we may have the tendency, oh, this person is autistic, this person is behaving in this way, therefore autistic people are people who have the tendency to behave in this way. Autism is part of being autistic, is having this certain behavioral cognitive peculiarity, but it doesn't have to be the case, because just as with the case with alexithymia, if autistic people tend to be rejected, they tend to be bullied, they tend to be misunderstood, they tend to have unaddressed trauma because of this. So if a person, an autistic person, is displaying a certain behavior, is this behavior because they are autistic? Is this behavior because they have been bullied? Is this behavior because they're having trauma? And so on. So I think that this is also one of the reasons why the conversation about autism and the conversation between autistic individuals and neurotypical individuals has been kind of complicated, let's say, because I think we have not really fully addressed this question of what is an autistic person at its core. What are the specific traits that come with being autistic, and what are the traits that are, yes, associated with being autistic, such as inability to see, address people's expression, having social difficulties and things like that. But how many of these are a consequence of being autistic in itself, or how many of these are a consequence of other things, such as alexithymia, such as depression, such as having been bullied, which tend to come together with being autistic. And I think it is very important to make this distinction, address these things separately, and see their the respective effect, so we can have a better understanding of what it is actually like to be an autistic person, and how autistic people and neurotypical people can learn to understand each other better. Thank you.